With the US spending record amounts of aid to Ukraine to help them not get overrun by Putin, and increasing aid to Israel because they need help funding their genocide. I mean, honestly, they really could afford it themselves, but you know. With that, there's been a lot of criticism lately for US foreign aid. And generally that criticism is levied against a lack of fill in the blank for US citizens. Which is understandable, we lack a lot of shit. Affordable education, healthcare, housing, etc. This is a really flawed way about looking at foreign aid because the reality is it's not an either or thing. We don't lack affordable healthcare or housing because we give some money to Ukraine. We don't have a homeless epidemic because we're writing checks to Israel. Now, in normal years, when Russia isn't trying to start World War III in Ukraine, our foreign aid portion of our budget is less than 1%. It is next to nothing, like less than $40 billion total in 2019. And it actually gives us a huge return on our investment economically and geopolitically speaking. Because here's the thing, is the US doesn't give money away to people out of the goodness of our heart. That's not something we do. If we're writing checks, we're writing them for a reason. And it's not because we care about starving children or some shit, because there's still lots of those. See, the US is the wealthiest country in the world, and we are the wealthiest country in the world because the world uses the US dollar as its currency standard. And the reason they use the US dollar as the world currency standard is because it's relatively stable. And the reason it's relatively stable is because we're America, world police, fuck yeah. This is really the reason we have this giant defense budget. Because if pirates are hijacking ships or China's blocking trade routes, we show up with a gigantic fucking navy and tell them to knock it the fuck off. That allows trade to continue, which fosters stability. That stability means money. North Korea starts to get frisky with South Korea, or Japan, which are some of our biggest trade partners. We start flying bombers and fighter jets around their country that cost more than their entire GDP. That means security, which means stability, which means money. Because the reality is that we are still a colonial empire, we just do it a little differently now. Instead of planting our flags on other people's lawns and saying this is ours now, corporations just go in and lay claim to the resources and allow the country to fend for itself. Minus them owning their resources that would help them, fend for themselves. But this type of colonialism is what's made America so incredibly wealthy. No different than it did with the British and the Spaniards and the Portuguese and the French back in the day, and why they spent so much money on their navies and armies as well. But as the world's modern economy and geopolitical situations have evolved, so has the way that we've done colonialism, and we found more mutually beneficial ways to do these kinds of things with at least some of our allies. This is where you get NATO and the UN and all of that. By creating strategic, economic, and defense alliances with a lot of our big partners, we've really eliminated colonial warmongering between major powers. That's why we haven't had a major war between superpowers since the 1940s. Don't get me wrong, we still do our colonial warmongering all the time, we just pick on the little guys that don't actually threaten us here at home. We're not going toe-to-toe with the British or the Germans or the Chinese or the Russians. But maintaining that stability and security is always a very delicate balance. Russia and China obviously don't want the United States setting up shop on their doorstep, and then South Korea, India, Taiwan, and all of Western Europe, as well as the United States, don't really want Russia and China moving into their territory. So one of the cheapest, most effective, and least inflammatory ways to maintain that stability and our interests in those regions is through foreign aid. We aid Japan and South Korea, and that helps keep China from getting too big for its britches. We aid Israel, and that gives us an intelligence resource, an ally, and a launching point in a region that we don't have a whole lot of friends. We aid the NATO countries, and it makes Russia think twice before getting frisky. And when they do get frisky and invade Ukraine, instead of us sending troops over there and escalating into a full-fledged war with a giant nuclear superpower, we spend a little bit of money to help Ukraine keep Russia at bay for us. And then either Ukraine wins and Russia gets put back in their place, or Russia succeeds and then inevitably moves into Poland because they really want Poland back as well. And Poland's a NATO country, which means that we are contractually obligated to come to their defense with a heavy military response. You attack one NATO country, you attack them all. But after years of fighting well-equipped Ukrainians, equipped by us and our NATO allies, with that ever so awful foreign aid, Russia is in a much weaker position to fight with a bunch of their forces and their resources and their equipment depleted. That would ultimately make it easier for a US-NATO victory and save US and NATO lives. Plus, our aid and kind of backseat involvement gives us a bunch of insight into how Russia's fighting a war and how we could more effectively kick their ass. So back to the original point, the aid we're giving away is not coming at the expense of American citizens. We are the richest country in the world, and we could absolutely afford to give everybody free healthcare, free college, and put a roof over everyone's head. We just choose not to because rich people are greedy as fuck and don't want to pay their taxes. But we do have the money to pay for it in this country if we wanted to, and the reason we have that money is in large part due to foreign aid, not in spite of it. So we really need to stop with the argument of, oh, we're giving aid to Ukraine when we still have homeless vets. That's a dumb argument. That's not an argument based in reality. That is not an either or thing. In fact, the aid we're giving to Ukraine is probably preventing us from ending up with a lot more vets suffering from PTSD who would end up homeless because because, you know, World War III wouldn't be pretty. Now, if you want to criticize how we do foreign aid, there's plenty to criticize. Like, the money we're sending to Israel is absolutely helping fund a genocide, and that is fucked up. It is super immoral, it's super unethical, and we should tell Israel to fuck all the way off until they stop doing the genocides. There's plenty of criticisms for how we're responsible for creating tensions with China and Russia, and how we've built and maintained systems and institutions, which includes our use of foreign aid, to continue and escalate those tensions. And even within that conversation, attacking Ukrainian aid is stupid. Russia is absolutely in the wrong. Ukraine absolutely deserves aid in their defense. It's in our best interest, absolutely. It's in the best interest of our allies. And ethically and morally, it's not even that muddy in this specific situation. Like, absolutely, we could go back historically and find some ethical issues as to what got us to the specific point. But in the current state of the world and current situation, aiding Ukraine is the right thing to do economically, ethically, and geopolitically. And it's not that aid that's making it hard for you to pay your rent. Because once again, even with the aid, we have all of the money in the world to help all of the people in our country. We just choose not to spend that money on our people. Because the Musks and the Bezos and the Gates of the world and their lapdogs in Congress would rather keep it for themselves. So if you want to be mad about how hard it is for Americans to get by day to day, even though we live in the wealthiest country in the world, then good. You should be mad about it. Just be mad at the right people for the right reasons. The top 1%. And Ronald Reagan, obviously. Because they are the root cause of absolutely everything that is wrong in the world.